Okay, hi everybody. I'm here with Matthew, and we're going to speak about the 49th gene key, or the 49 gate, and we call it the archetype of the revolutionary. So I want to start by asking you, actually, first of all, I want to tell everybody that you have it in your radiance, and you also have it somewhere else in your chart.
SQ.
In your SQ, yeah. So on your design side, on your soul activations, you have it twice. So I'm interested in hearing both of it, how it has shown up for you, but more than anything, to start, tell us a little bit about your story, so that we know who you are, and then we can go in to see like how has the 49 showed up for you.
Oh, okay. So how's my story been with the gene keys, for instance?
Well, first, like a little bit who you are, maybe, and then the gene keys.
Who I was before the gene keys. So yeah, I'm Matthew. I was born and raised in England, lived there till I was 20 years old, but now I live on Vancouver Island in the West Coast because I completely reacted against everything British and had to revolutionize my mind and step onto the other side of the Atlantic. So as far west as I can be. And so I do have family here, but most of my family's in the UK still. My immediate family's still in the UK. And I finished university in England, and I've got a second gene key as my life's work. So I left university feeling a little lost. And so, but I always knew I wanted to live in Canada. Ever since I was a kid, I'd had pictures of British Columbia's rainforests on my wall and wanted to go and live there. And so I moved here, not with any kind of clear intention per se. I thought I might be here for a year or so, and 20 years later, I'm still here and enjoying it, just loving it here. And, I've been involved in the world of fitness and wellness for the last 15, 20 years now. Let's be specific here, 17 years. And so I've really seen a lot of different aspects of it. I've really been interested in the whole mind, body, soul connection throughout wellness. I started out, as a meathead in the gym, but over time was learning that I really wanted to dig deeper into it. And it was in 2012 that I came across the gene keys for the first time. And that really helped me understand and integrate things in a whole new way. And it helped me understand the life journey that I've been on and continue to live on. And yeah, so that's who I am in a nutshell, really. And I'm sharing this work with as many people as I can, as often as I can, and just loving what's growing through this community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have the second gene key as my life's work too, and then of course the first gene key as my evolution. And it sounds a little bit the same. I was 18 and I had to move away, and it was also, I was supposed to stay there for 6 months studying, and I lived in France for like 8 years, and I didn't really, it kind of, the second gene key is a little bit like, it takes you somewhere, and it has a direction, but you don't really know how it's going to flow there.
No, and we have to trust. And we have to surrender to it. And it looks messy to everybody else. But as long as we know where we are in the moment, then it's good.
Right. Yeah, so that is your personality side is the second gene key in the first, and then in your radiance you have the 49 and the fourth. So for me this week we are in the transit now, we're in the sixth line of the 49th, and so what we are doing with my business partner Ashley is that every week we go into the transit and we explore it and we write about it and we find a name for it. And this week has been a bit challenging because we felt like we could find so many examples of the shadow frequency, of reaction, of war, of like indifference, of like I'm separate from you, so I don't care, I can actually kill you and eat you, basically, especially with the mammals and all that. And it was harder for us to find, a peaceful revolution example. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, I would love to hear some of the, higher frequencies, and how it is to actually, your aura basically is this 49. How is it to shine this revolutionary in your life and walk around like that aura?
Yeah. Yeah, it has been an interesting one to integrate in that way, and I've had to sit with it and penetrate it really deeply over the years because so often you look into society and where are those examples of it where they really stood that. And I happen to be looking at Abraham Lincoln's gene keys the other day, and 49 is his life's work key. And so it gives me, it's like knowing that Paramhansa Yogananda talked about him as being a great yogi who'd reappeared into that timeline as Abraham Lincoln to bring through this this freedom from oppression for the slaves down in the South there. And so I've sat with some of these characters, and what's interesting for me is quite often I've been, if I look at the shadow of that 49th gene key, I've seen in the past where I suppressed those reactions, didn't want to be reactive. I see that in my world around me, and so I didn't want to be the reactive. And oftentimes when I would see the reactive would be when I would do things like past life regressions or
Mhm.
other kind of work where I saw this other side of my being, where it's like, oh wow, okay, so it's integrating these two, it's acknowledging these two shadows. And I worked as a personal trainer for 10 years, and I could really see an element of that 49th gene key coming through at the gift level with that, because it was, when we talk about the 49th gene key and that internal revolution, the silent revolution from within, I went through a lot of my own inner revolutions to become a personal trainer in the first place. During my university years, I was somebody who did not like myself, did not like my body, did not like taking care of myself. And so it took that inner revolution for me to step out and cross the Atlantic and then become this person that actually guided other people through it. And when I first read about the how the 49th gene key has so much to do with understanding needs, right, and working with needs, it made so much sense having it both in the SQ and the radiance there, because it's then, it's like working with, people really helping to ascertain what they truly need, what they can let go of, that kind of thing. And I always find it fascinating how we move from this pulse of this 49th and then on into the 30th, where it's the purification through that 30th gene key. And so, I've seen it in that aspect with that. I've also always been a very sensitive person, and I can really feel that through this gate as well. This real sensitive to my environment, sensitive to the groups that I'm a part of. I have played the reactionary at times, for sure. I can see that. I've been both the conformist and the reactionary in different
Mhm.
times and stages of my life. So it's interesting to just be the observer of that now. I guess that second gene key carries me through all those different experiences. And so just carrying that out into the world and just being mindful, because like you said, we just carry it through who we are. And I'm in Canada at this time during this pulse of revolution. There's lots of people speaking about a revolution that we're seeing with the First Nations people making a stand for their land, the protection of their land. And it's starting to have this ripple on effect. And so through every moment, I'm noticing, am I coming from a place of reaction, stating things out of a place of reaction, or am I coming from a place of of knowing and understanding for myself? Because this pairs with that fourth gene key, that gift of understanding is very helpful in that. And so, because that always struck me when I first read about that 49th gene key, and there's the revolutionaries we've known in history, and so often they've actually more been reactionaries.
Right.
And so cultivating that and understanding that and seeing how that plays a role in my life, and how I can best serve others through that has definitely been an interesting journey.
Right. And you know, when we speak about the golden path, we say that the SQ has to do with our childhood and kind of what we get from our parents and that imprinting from 0 to 7. And here you have the 49, and you have the fifth line, we speak about role models with integrity. So do you feel like you had role models that were role modeling the reactions, or did you have good role models for what a peaceful revolution can look like, or how were these 7 first years for you?
Yeah, I could say I saw all of the above. I saw the reactionaries, and then I also saw, I learned a lot about it from my dad, observing him, and he's actually another second gene. He's got the second gene key in his chart somewhere, and and when I saw that, it really helped me to understand him and understand the similarity of our journeys. And my mom has the 49th gene key. I think it's her IQ. So I'm pretty sure in those first 7 years, she was young when she had us, and I was the first of the five to pop into the world. So I'm pretty sure I probably caused her a little bit of stress and strain from time to time. Um, but generally speaking, from my memory, is that yes, they did. They showed me that. They showed me that restraint too,
Mm.
the restraint within that, to so that we don't act on our reactions. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of memories that can come to mind immediately of experiences, but nothing that left like a lifelong imprint of shame or guilt or anything like that on me. At least not in the home front.
Right.
School, that's a different matter. That was a different kind of environment. Yeah.
So do you want to share anything about school, or do you feel like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I could share some more about that. I could share some about school for sure. So, I mean, during my teenage years, I definitely had some very helpful teachers that saw the potentials within me and helped nurture that. During those early years in that SQ, I remember one time when the teacher came back from being out of the room, and for some reason I was dancing on a table with a buddy of mine, and we got into a lot of trouble. And I can still picture her face at this time. Another time was when, in my kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, I went into school one day, and I had these toy soldiers, and I bought them each for a penny each, and I wanted to make some extra money, and so I sold them for 2 pennies each, right? Maybe a little too much, I don't know, but I went into school and I sold them all. And then I got caught by the Catholic nun that was my teacher. And we'll just say that I got a little bit of a telling off for that. And I had to go around and I had to give everybody their money back. And I think I got most of the toy soldiers back. But it left quite an imprint on me that didn't surface to my conscious awareness until I was probably in my early 20s at a seminar where it just suddenly popped out of nowhere. And so that was all in that kind of that age range up to about 7 years of age. So definitely I could see that. And if I look at the storylines and the things that I was drawn to, the archetypes, the myths, I mean, I was always into the legends of Arthur, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So, when I stumble upon Gene Keys, and here he is talking in the Pearl sequence, all about the search for the Holy Grail, I'm like, I love it. And yeah, so I can also see that aspect of it with the SQ, is that the things that I was really drawn to in my youth, the things that inspired me, and a lot of them were around that kind of that quest, and these knights that were different, or these people that were different to the world around them and brought something new into the world. And so when, again, seeing that 49th gene key operating in my life like that, it's like, oh, okay, this is neat. This is neat to see. So it's definitely been, even as I share this today, it's like there's little things popping in here and there, again, that don't necessarily pop in when I'm just contemplating on my own.
Yeah, we said something before we started recording about the 5-1, and I hear when we in human design we call it a heretic, in the gene keys it's the fixer, but what I hear is kind of this person and this young boy who doesn't take anybody else's laws, and just in that basically there is the revolutionary, because you're doing it your way, and then sometimes it doesn't work that well for what other people think, but it's
Yeah.
still like that's, and you have a lot of 5 lines to life's work, the evolution, the SQ, and so there are, and the vocation as well, so there are it's like this voice that wants to do things its own way and doesn't take somebody else's truth, really.
Yes, definitely. There's, whenever I've seen that, I had seen that before too in groups that I've been a part of, where I'd been really drawn to, say, the teaching or the master. And then when I saw the dogmatism within the disciples, it was a turnoff for me. It's like, no, I can't. And I would turn away, I would react, I'd push it away. So it was that classic thing with the 49th gene key of that, you know, almost that fear of rejection under the surface. So it's like I pushed them away before they gave me, you know, before I gave them a chance to push me away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting seeing it all weaving together, and seeing that even times when I feel closer to that revolutionary, I can still feel the aspects of the reactionary. And I've also had those moments where I've looked at certain things and begun to wonder whether I, you know, regret those choices. Like you know, if after finishing my university degree, it was, I turned because I studied aerospace engineering, but again, I felt lost. I felt, you know, throughout university years, I was having insomnia. I was like, this isn't quite, this is missing something, is what I felt. And it was the spirit element, but I didn't know that until I went on my own journey. And now it's like I could look back and look at all I learned, and I could regret not having followed that path, because I can look at seeing some of the people I went to university with 20 years ago, and they're the head of organizations, and they're, you know, they've got this lifestyle and that lifestyle, and I can have those moments of like, but it's like, no, you know, I chose this for myself. I recognize the choices I made, and I am, you know, feeling much more congruent with who I am than if I had followed that path before. So there's a little bit of Taurus stubbornness in there too, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. Are you born on May 8th or something like that?
Yes, May 8th is my birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, May 7th. Yeah, I can see that. I kind of like to look at your South Node as well, because it's kind of, it says that you come, you know, your South Node, what you know is about farsightedness. It's about lots of different things. And it's like, and then later in life, you find your perfection, you find what's your path with, you know, complete. So it looks like you're somebody who would live in different countries, who would look at different cultures and be able to see all of it. You know, the fifth line does that, but sometimes the fifth line could be maybe focused on their truth. But I feel like with the South Node in the 17th here is that, you know, you want to see the big pictures of things, and then you decide how to live. And
Yeah.
also your drive is that 8th, so it's like it's your own style. It's going to be in your style. It's not going to be a path that is linear. And how could it ever be with the second gene key as your life's work? It's not linear. It's like water. It flows in. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I can see all that. And because I'm not as familiar with my human design chart as I am with um, my gene keys chart, that's very helpful with that 17th gene key at my South Node there, because the 17th gene key is one that does show up in my world a lot, right? And I've seen it in a lot of people. I've got some good friends where it's a prominent one in their chart. And I've seen where it's been one that's really challenged me to grow, and I really appreciated it. I've also seen where I reacted to it too, and so it's really helpful actually seeing that in the human design chart, because like I said, that's not something I'm too familiar with. So I never looked at the 17 in that way before, as something that was connected to my own personal journey. It was always, you know, oh, these are the people I'm meeting in my life, right? And so that helps to add some useful perspective.
It is interesting too, because if we look at human design mechanics, we'll see that you have the 17, you have it twice, and you have the 62. So if you meet people that only have the 17th, you're basically overpowering them because you have the whole channel. So you can even, there could be this kind of reaction again, the low frequency of the 49, because you have the whole channel, you have the whole process, and they might have the 17 in the life's work, but still it's going to be in the mechanics, this thing that you're kind of seeing the whole spectrum of what they can't see. So even that can be something, and you know it well because it's your south node on both sides. So I can see how even that 17 would create, kind of would bring in the 49 and create those situations where you kind of have to look at reaction, you have to see how to transmute that, or how to. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I actually can see too how I allowed, especially the opinion side of the shadow of that 17, to be something that when I ventured out in the past, that it was something I allowed to get to me. And so much so that I would hold back. And when I can connect it into that farsightedness aspect of it, it makes a whole lot more sense, because it's I've always, yeah, it's like, give me the overview. That's I can feel that in that relation to the 49th gene key too, when 49 has this perspective of the society and the changes that we're going through, and also that keen understanding of how long it takes for those changes to play out. And also, again, because having experienced so many different sides of life and so many different cultures, like I'm working with people in Holland right now, I'm working with people in the UK, I lived in the UK, I've lived in Canada. I've just spent all this morning standing with First Nations in Vancouver Island here. So it's this real seeing into these different cultures and these ways of being that, and I feel it just, I can see how it would connect with both of those, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, because in human design, we say that the open centers are kind of a risk in a way, because when they're open centers, we take in all the energy from the outside, so from the environment, from other people, and we basically kind of get flooded. We have to filter it through us. And either we're going to become really pressured or conditioned, or we can be wise about it, and we can know, okay, this is not me, this is just something that is kind of coming through me. So it's also to see that you have that 49 in an open emotion center would say that is more challenging, because you not only have the 49, but you also have to discern, is this me, or is this is this something that I'm taking in from the outside? And you were saying, I think you were mentioning something about in the beginning, because the not self strategy for the open emotion center is to avoid conflict and confrontation. So I'm wondering how it has worked for you to have both that 49 and then the 55 that is about victimization and not feeling free in an open center, and how it is to, because you also said you're a projector and you have a lot of openness here, you're kind of sensitive with your energy. So could you say something about that 49, that 55 in an open center, and knowing kind of what's yours and what's not yours, and what you're kind of avoiding because you don't want to have to take in the turmoil that comes from the outside? Something about that process.
Yeah, I would say that in the past, I've not always known. I remember going with a friend at one point, and we were off on a cycle ride around the city. She was visiting from Ontario. We went on a cycle ride, and it was such a beautiful day. I felt so good. And then we pulled over, and we were stood, and we were looking out across at the ocean, and both of us were just silent. And I was just like, why do I feel this unease? Like, I feel fine. There's nothing. And I voiced it to her, and she said, oh, you're probably picking up on me. And the moment that I realized that what she was going through, it just suddenly it felt, I relaxed, right? And so that was that was a number of years ago now, but it was one of the first occasions that really helped me to see that. And it's like there's that discernment on it. For the other week, I was driving to a group that I'm part of in another part of Vancouver Island, and I was driving there, and I just felt this sadness washing over me. I was like, this sadness coming through. and in that moment, it was like, again, there was that discernment. It's like, is this something I'm feeling, or is this something connected with the group? And spending 2 hours with the group when I was facilitating some things with them, it was realizing, oh, okay, there is a lot here. And to remain open to that, such that now when I'm returning to this group, I'm not feeling that anymore. There's an openness, there's been these huge transformations within the group, within the individuals in the group. And yes, some of that sadness is still coming through in it because it was a big one. But it's like, yeah, it's knowing when it's mine, and also, like you said, to just be open to the suffering of others, to be able to be present to it without trying to fix it, because there's that line 5. That's when the fixer could step in there and attempt to go and fix this situation or change this. I mean, obviously with me and my wife, that's probably where it's shown up the most over the years, right? Is learning to where to allow her to have her experiences, her emotions. She's also very sensitive. She's a 19th gene key pearl, so she just, connects in and taps into everybody. So we've had that real learning curve in our relationship, such that it's helped us when we go out and do our work in the world. And so it's like, even in these last few days when there's been a lot of tension mounting in Vancouver Island and BC because of the protests that are happening, and a lot of sensitives are feeling the energy of it. And I have to say, yesterday I was feeling particularly drained through that, and it was making sure I was taking the time for myself and taking that care. So it's definitely an ongoing process with that in different situations. And of course, you mentioned that 55th gene key. So, having the 49 and the 55 there has been, especially with them being the ring of the whirlwind in the gene keys, it makes for an interesting experience with the world around me, for sure.
Yeah, and it's all soul activations. It's kind of what we say in human design, which is unconscious. So it's not even something you can really think about. It's something that you get aware of as you are walking through the world, as you are relating to other people. But that is even, in your emotional center, there's only red activations, there's only the design activations, there's only the soul that is there. So that's also why it's somehow even more mystical in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see, yeah, I can see. And interesting that your wife has the 19, because then you have that channel 1949 that we say that there is a mutation going on in how we relate, the reaction, the codependency that has been in relationships for forever, and that there's something new on the other side of that, and to have that every day to look at, what's always been, and the possibility of what it is with interdependence, what it is with a rebirth through the relationship. I guess just that is like a life's work in somehow,
Oh yeah, and our relationship has definitely gone through that, and with the help of this body of work, for sure. She's 49 in her evolution.
Oh, wow.
So 4 in her life's work and 49 in her evolution. So we're the mirrors in our gene key charts are complete mirrors. So it's it's like, it's taught us that personal responsibility for each of it, and being so sensitive and being so connected, and looking at where we're intertwined, and where we can move more into that independence and interdependence. And because when you feel so deeply and connect in so deeply, it really takes that awareness, because oftentimes for either of us, we'll just sense what the other person's going through, even if they're not saying anything. And
Right.
and it's allowing that space for them to have that, to experience that, and having our own journey with it too. So yeah, it's definitely, yeah, the new human that's birthing out of that and the new human relationships is quite fascinating.
Yeah, and I have the first gene key as my evolution too, and that is that entropy or that void. And it's kind of it's the individual circuitry. So sometimes it gets really dark, and you're kind of floating in the void, and you don't know what the spark or the new human being or the new world is.
Yeah.
And I see that you also have it twice. You have it in your Uranus. So how I wonder that challenge of being a 5-1 that wants to fix, but then having the evolution, that first gene key that asks you to kind of stay in the void and not decide when the creativity sparks. Has that been a challenge for you, or how do you relate to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. In in my 20s, I was total go-getter. I just I went out and created things, and I went out and did things, and they seemed to flow, they seemed to connect. And um, in 2007, a friend of mine, we put a video on YouTube, and it's called The Original Gratitude Dance. You can still see it, and it went viral. And we had all these things unfolding for us. And we were getting book deals, and we were getting to speak at these amazing engagements and everything. And then we lost the book deal. The book deal was pulled, and other things happened, and it just started. That's when I figured I first really encountered that. And so now I can look back and see really what a blessings those experiences were. Not necessarily feeling that way at the time, but feeling very lost and very confused and very, you know, un uncreative. Right? That's the word. Yeah. And and that's what the last sort of 8 to 10 years has been about, is just being okay with being in the void. And it has been challenging at times, for sure, because it's like I try and, especially not so much since I've encountered this body of work, but before that it would be to try and push things. And you might relate to this too, when you, because I've got the second gene key, and I've got so many passions, and it's like, oh, follow this one a little way, follow that one a little way, push this one, push that one, and suddenly it's like you've got all these fireworks going off in different directions, but nothing was landing. And so it was almost like I had to, I just felt switched off, and so I stepped away from my world of facilitating. I stepped away from so many of those things to go into the void. And I feel like it's just in the last year and a half, maybe even less, where it's just kind of been emerging from that as I've really allowed myself to go through it, and even still continuing to go through it. Because then, yeah, that first gene key, it's like having those moments where we're feeling just in the melancholy. I remember one night I was sitting at home by myself. My wife was out at a ceremony, and I was sitting reading and just contemplating this first gene key, and because I felt that sadness. And throughout all my years before, people had always, they'd seen this happy face, but they also felt the deep sadness within. And when I looked at that, I could really feel it and not know what the source of it was, and was trying to understand what the source of it was, and trying to make it go away. Whereas now, here I was sitting here reading this and just experiencing it. And tears are coming down my eyes. And then suddenly my front door bursts open, and there's my wife standing there coming back from her ceremony. And she's like, oh my God, my heart is so open right now. And she looks over at me, and she takes one look at me, steps back, closes the door, and walks away, because she knew she had to give me that space with it. She couldn't come in and fix it. She couldn't. And that was a pivotal thing in our relationship, because being the 19, feeling that so often she'd want to help me with that. But right. It was like, oh, no, it doesn't need fix. He's just going through it. And so, yeah, there's those times when it's like, it can feel like the spark is just totally gone. And then right. Other times when it's just, I've learned more and more to be okay with them. But in the past, that 49, that aspect of me, the reactive side, would react against the entropy, would react against the confusion. And it's like, no, this isn't what it means to be successful. And then I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to follow this. I got to, and then being a projector on top of that, it's all like, it was confusing.
Yeah, oh, wow. I wish that there are people that have the second gene key as their life's work in their first gene key as evolution that watch this, because I feel like what you just said is also something, if you have that first gene key in your evolution, then look at the other side, at the design side, and see what you have there. Because as for me, having the first gene key as my evolution, and I have discord and division on my design side, and I know that when I'm in that entropy and when I'm trying to run away from it, I'm a generator, so I try to run away from it, and then I will, like, that's what's gonna happen. So I think that is just such a wonderful contemplation when you are in that first gene key evolution and you feel trapped and you can't get anywhere, you can't get it to spark. Like, look how you're relating on in the radiance and the purpose, because that is, I think, that is so much the dynamics of the shadow frequency and how it can fuel forever until we allow it. And we kind of, it's a little like, I see the first gene key a bit like, how long did Eros have to wait for the Big Bang? Like, he was there in the void, and I don't know how many, light years or eons of time. And then one day the conditions were right for that Big Bang, for that spark that could create the universe. But that is basically how helpless and how alone, like, that's how it can feel. And nobody, it doesn't matter how big the heart is, nobody on the outside can come in and spark that. It can only come from the inner. And I guess you with the 49, you also have that. It's from the inner. For you, that has been everything in your life is kind of pointing you back to that in some way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's because I've been practicing something Kundalini Kriya Yoga for the last, I think it's 10 plus years, and it's all been about that inner journey and that inner revolution. And then it was because of this body of work coming in and helping me make a sense of things with that fifth line of mine, making it practical to be able to embody it. So yeah, it's definitely been, and it's always been about that inner journey first. And like I said, even when I see things exploding in the world around me and I feel like that reactionary that wants to jump in and take part, it's also remembering to sit in that, in the 49 and the 4, and just be cognizant and be aware of those. Because then, if not, yes, the 2 and the 1 get fueled by that 4 and the 49. And so I just feel like, okay, I've got to really sit with this before I jump out into any kind of action. So definitely.
Yeah, and I guess you're born in the end of the 70s, and I'm in the beginning of the 80s. So and for me, it's kind of the same with the South Node and the North Node. It takes us plus 30 years to kind of be, in the process of actually being able to actually even allow that. I guess the first and the second gene keys are basically they are the polarities of the main forces of the universe. It takes a while to be able to get them, to incorporate them in a human life, in a human experience. It's not something that we just do easily in one day. And I guess also there is a need for understanding of the people that are around us, because we are kind of encompassing a lot by having those activations. And that's our everyday life, basically, with the life's work and evolution in those activations.
Yeah. And I feel, I don't know about you, but I'm only starting to meet other people now that have that combination, there's, and recognizing how I can support them in that understanding, because wow, they definitely feel like where I felt in the past, and understanding that it happens in nature's timing, not in this, not in my timing. And so yeah, it's interesting hearing yours, and then when you relate it to the 13 and the 7 in that way, because I've had the 2-1, and that's all. You're the only other person I've met with the 2-1 combination that's doing this kind of work to even share that with. So this is revolution right here for me, because I'm being able to hear it from another perspective with somebody with different radiance and purpose, right? It's also interesting seeing the people I've been drawn to in my life, the people that I've been drawn to as teachers and leaders. My yoga master, he has the same 49-4 in his radiance and purpose. In fact, he was born on the day that I was supposed to be born, not 30 years earlier, but you know what I mean. And that's what I've always found fascinating, is I look to the people that I've been drawn to in my life as teachers, and the ones that I respect, and so they're the ones who've helped me to step more into the 49 revolution and the 4 understanding, because they exemplified it, and it's taken that years of um, being open to it to actually see that in others. Because oftentimes when I see the 49th gene key in somebody, um, the reason I'm looking is because I feel like I'm seeing the shadow in them, and sure enough, there it is in their, their dehumanizing of others, that aspect of the 49th gene key, which is which seems to go so opposite to who I am, but I have to recognize is a nature, is an aspect of this 49th key, right? And so it's also, also realizing that there's so much potential for the violence within that 49th gene
Right.
key has always kept me in check, because if there was something that's fueled my desires, and it would be to have peace. The reason I got out of aerospace engineering is because I graduated at the time of the Gulf War and Second Gulf War, and all my friends were going into designing military weapons and things like that, and it just did not resonate with my being.
Right.
And so that was the part of that shadow nature that I had pushed to the extremes in a way. But it's also because I feel the pull of the higher realms of those 2 gene keys in particular.
Yeah. So I feel like you already gave a lot of advices if you have, for people that have the 49, or if you live close to somebody that has it. But is there anything that you would like to add? Because for me, like I said, it has been a quite tough transit, and it took me back to a couple of weeks ago when we were in the 19th, and I don't have anything in my emotional center. So is there anything that you could add, like an advice, when we kind of encounter this in this 49, or how we can make it easier for somebody who has it there, that maybe is not into the gene keys, but that is in our life? What could that be?
Ooh, that's a great question. And it's interesting because my wife has never really been into the gene keys. She tunes into it with that 19th gene. She can't help but tune into it. So she's actually been a really great example of that, exactly what you're talking about. Because the other day she sent someone to me who was struggling with reaction, and she said to that person, she says, "So I know she's picking these things up." She says, "Well, that's my evolution. I still haven't learned that, so I'm going to get you to talk to Matthew about that." And it's one of the things I would say is that sometimes it feels like there's this really high voltage of emotion running through me. I've also got the 52nd gene key as my pearl, so I'm thankful for that, because that offers that restraint. It
Mm-hmm.
offers that restraint in those moments, because there have been times when I've been not so kind to myself, and that's how usually it would express. I've
Right.
always tried to be kind to others, but sometimes I wouldn't be so kind to myself. Um, and and so for me, breath work has been huge. When I feel that voltage of emotion, um, there's processes that they use in trauma release work called regulation, which I found very helpful for regulating the central nervous system. And then also, yeah, just breathing, finding that rhythm with it, and allowing the emotions to come through, but being aware of when I'm acting on them, and do my best not to. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's times when I have acted on the emotions and regretted it later. And all I can call upon there is that 4th gene key purpose of mine to bring in some forgiveness, to forgive myself. And I found that has helped, is that over time, it means that I'm less reactive to others, because I'm forgiving myself for the times when I've been reactive before.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I see that reaction in others, I'm much more forgiving and understanding of it, and because that's one of the pluses I can say, is that when I've got this, is I can hold space for people's anger and frustration to be vented without taking any of it on. So I've been in the presence of some pretty, big outbursts, but had the strength to be able to stand in it, recognizing it's not my own. So definitely, I would say if you're prone to those reactions, or if you know people who are, it's it's that process, because sometimes the trauma runs so deep and
Yeah.
we don't know it. Sometimes it's trauma from, I had an accident when I was 14 and I didn't realize at the time how trauma affected the body, right? And how it affected, and I went deep into depression, and then I went deep into reaction and shame and many other things. And so it would react on that. and and then later on, after healing a lot of that, there's also, for me, past life work has always been I've always resonated deeply with past life work. And that's also shown me some things and some aspects of my nature, related to this key in particular, that have been really helpful. But without a doubt, it's like there's times when I can just feel that real surge of emotions, and I just have to remember to breathe into the emotion at a place within my being where it feels safe to breathe into it, so that to allow it to pass.
Wow. Thank you. I already feel like I that everything that I felt this week with the transit, and where I felt a bit of like hopelessness, like where is the world going? Why can't I see the gift? Now it feels like, I'm a 4/6, so you're kind of igniting that vision in me, and you're also the optimism, and the higher frequencies of the 13 and the 7. Like I'm like, okay, now I get it. It's happening. We are mutating. So
Yeah, we are. I do have trust in that. I actually wrote about this last night because I was feeling inspired around it. Because, it's people seeing what looks like the shadow masculine seeming so prevalent in the world. And I am just seeing so many men waking up together. Do you know
mm,
what I mean? And I love seeing it. And there's guys younger than me, half my age, that are waking up to this. And I really trust in that. I trust that we're mutating. I trust that we're learning to come more from our hearts. I trust that we're learning how to be true revolutionaries. And I do feel it's gonna express, and hopefully we can do a lot to turn things around. And but I do trust that the essence of this revolution is really beginning to burst forth in the many people that I meet in my journey. That's for sure.
mm. Wow, thank you. What a beautiful way to end. And your contact information is going to be there, because I feel like if some men, if any, this is something that it's such an important topic, and that's the 49/5 again in your SQ, the role model, to be able to role model with maturity something. Just that makes, that is what makes the ripple effects in the world. So thank you so much for sharing all this. And I know we went over like by I don't know, I said 30 minutes, but
Wow.
it was so, it was just so beautiful to be able to speak, about the whole activation sequence and how it plays out with the conscious and the unconscious, because it's really that dance in between. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. That was awesome. We enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye.